Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting of Diversity Committee to order, please. My name is Rhonda Herman. I chair the Diversity Committee. I'd like to welcome my vice chair, Commissioner Susan Metzger. I'd like to welcome Linda Lacewell and Neil Zuckerman, who are committee members. We will now have the safety announcement.
Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you and have a safe day.
Thank you. Michael, are there any public speakers today?
Yes, there's four. Maria?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Our first public speaker is Jason Anthony.
Good morning, Rhonda, Susan, Neil, and Bob. It's a good, and Linda. It's a good day that we have finally Sarah Feinberg as the interim New York City Transit Chair. But we should have more diversity. We should have more women, veterans, members of the LGBTQ community, Puerto Ricans, etc. I hope that by the end of this year, we should accomplish the diversity. We want to be just like the melting pot. This is a book that Esmeralda Santiago wrote about diversity in New York City. I hope that the MTA will become more diverse in the workforce and in management also. So I'll see you guys in the full board.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Tosif Khan. Next, we have Mr. Robert Griswold.
Sorry, we were told that list was for the board meeting, and the other list was for the diversity committee meeting. We tried to sign up for the board meeting.
There's a list right outside sitting at the table.
Right, that's what we signed.
Okay, great. So the board meeting starts at 9:30.
Okay.
At 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. That's it? Great.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the June 24th, September 23rd, and December 18th, 2019 Diversity Committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next, we will have the approval of the 2020 work plan. May I have a motion? Second. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? The work plan is also approved. Are there any updates on the 2020 work plan, Michael?
The only update is that, as you know, that the presidents were expected to share their best practices at this meeting. Due to the crunch time frame, they're going to now report at the September board meeting. So they report every year in February and September, so they're going to be reporting in September of 2020.
I'm sorry, can you clarify? They're going to be reporting what?
Their EEO workforce best practices. And basically it's done twice a year in February, but since we had a half an hour a day, they are reporting at their respective committees this month, but in September, they will be reporting before the diversity committee.
So we're already getting through the other committee meetings, their reports.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
We have an hour now.
Yeah, but,
They
but
weren't prepared.
yeah, right, was prepared.
Are there any comments from the committee members?
I just don't want to leave it hanging that we only have half an hour. We should book, the schedule may have changed. We do have an hour. I understand if it can't happen today. I'm not looking to be a pain in the neck, but it's a very important committee. The work the team is doing is very important. It's important to the authority. It's important to the city, important to the writers. So we should just make sure we take the time that we need. If we need to book extra sessions or do work ahead of time to brief folks, I'm happy to make myself available, and I know the other committee members would
look,
too.
I agree with Commissioner Lacewell, and let's just, when's our next meeting?
In May.
Okay, so why don't we just have them come in May? And,
Right.
I mean, I do agree that having redundant topics is never great. Like, we have the EEOC discussion in the committees and doing it again, just like we do with safety. We have the same exact conversation in the safety committee that we just had in the operating committees. I don't think that's a good use of anyone's time. However, if we're going to have if you're going to look, Michael, for commonality among the EEOC reports and pull the threads together that say, oh, there's a best practice in one, we're not sharing it elsewhere. That's a productive use, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so, we shouldn't wait till September. Let's have it in May at our next meeting. We're not asking much of the operating leaders to come talk about a report they're already talking about, and that gives you a couple of months still to develop some thoughts on what is best in some and less good in others.
Agreed. So, go ahead.
Since we're all hopping in here, we did have the best practices in committee, and when it comes to workforce, I think it's very important for the entire operating committee to hear what's going on, because the operating committees have an obligation to have the diverse workforce that this committee is striving to achieve. So I liked having it in committee, that part of it, but there was not anything addressing what we know to be one of our stellar accomplishments in diversity, and I'm sure that's what we're going to hear today, right?
Yes,
I
yes,
hope
you are.
so.
Yes, you are.
Thanks.
So, Michael, the committee is asking that from now on that at committee meetings, the workforce analytics be discussed and presented also by the
Great.
heads. Michael, can you take us through the executive summary, please?
Yes, so we are going to talk about MWDB outreach and Z.
Good morning. Business and Diversity Initiatives Unit continues to plan the outreach events for the MWBE program, highlighting the following upcoming events are an SDVOB event, which is the annual Competitive Edge Committee SDVOB networking event. It's a committee of city and state agencies advocating for SDVOB community, providing information on contracting opportunities, and that will be held March 27 at the New York Power Authority. Upcoming is the MTA Agency-Wide Connect Conference, which will be held on April 30th at the CUNY Graduate Center, and this event is specifically for the agency-wide procurement staff, where we will be highlighting opportunities, networking sessions, and building relationships between the MTA and the small business community. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, and as Z indicated, that it's our annual MWDB conference where a lot of our prime contractors and consultants will be there, and each one of the operating agencies will talk about the upcoming opportunities that we have here at the MTA. And so historically, we've attracted about 200 to 300 MWBEs, so it's our major event that we have once a year. Next is going to be the DBE certification results with Danny Camacho.
Good morning. I'm happy to report that in 2019, we certified a record number of DBEs, that being 90, as compared to 59 firms in 2018. Now, of those 90 firms, 10 of those have already received awards from the MTA, totaling approximately $16 million. And that concludes my report.
So that's a great point, because we have we cut back on our MWDB outreach because of the budget, but we got to get back out there because we have competition from other agencies that are looking for the same pool of MWDB firms. So it's my recommendation that we get back out and we actively recruit MWDBs. Now I'm having conversation with Jano Lieber due to the expanded capital plan that we have. While some view it as a challenge, I view it as an opportunity to go out and to bring more MWDB firms in here. But the bottom line is that it's not the outreach, it's not the recruitment, it's not the certification. But once firms are certified, what are we doing to integrate them into the business practices here? And so that should be the focal point of making sure that firms who we recruit and certify are actively engaged in contracting activity here at the MTA. And so my staff also did an analysis on MWDBEs who we touch. We reached out to 1,700 firms last year, and the data that I got, I was not happy or comfortable with reporting that data this morning. So at the May Diversity Committee meeting, we are going to report of the 1,700 firms that we reached out and touched last year, how many of those firms ultimately were certified and got contracts. And this is not only in capital construction, but it's going to be in architect, engineers, vendors and suppliers, law firms, investment banking firms, et cetera.
Yes, Neil. And then
Michael, what do you mean you weren't comfortable with the information? What does that mean? I'm sorry.
The information that we ran, it appeared to be flawed because we did not link up the firm's tax ID numbers to PeopleSoft to get an accurate accounting of payments that were made and contracts that were awarded. So we need to go through an exercise of linking up the tax ID numbers for each one of those firms in order for us to get accurate data.
That is, just listening to you, that sounds a little disconcerting. And I hearken back to my early days in this board when Susan was chair of this committee, and we had a couple of other administrative errors and challenges that the Inspector General identified. And I just want to make sure that if you need assistance, which I think had happened at the time with internal audit, was helping you,
Right.
I'd like to make sure that before what sounded like a leading indicator of a potential problem analytically and administratively, we get in front of that. And I appreciate your honesty in front of us, board, in a public setting, but that's, my chest hurts a little bit hearing that.
Right. Well, I mean, and we did not have enough time to vet and assign the federal tax ID numbers for the firms who we touch. So we're currently doing that right now. So at the May meeting, that information will be vetted and it will be accurate.
Because PeopleSoft, my understanding of what we did with PeopleSoft, we have that capability. It's just not been accomplished yet, right?
Well, the firms who we reached out to, we did not have all of their federal tax ID numbers. So we're garnering that as we speak. Once we get those federal tax ID numbers, we can then link that up to PeopleSoft and cross-reference how many of those firms actually received payments.
Money. Okay. So we'll hear in May.
In May.
Danny's report made me think of something. Since we've cut back on outreach, what accounts for the discrepancy in your mind in the number of people that you were able to certify from the year to year?
Firms still come to us regardless of the outreach efforts. They hear about it from friends, family members, business colleagues, and so they still express an interest in applying for DBE regardless and doing business with MTA.
And so Danny is also having monthly DBE certification workshops.
Right.
And so historically, only 2 or 3 firms showed up. Now there's 15, 20 firms showing up monthly in order to get a line-by-line assistance as to how to accurately fill out their DBE certifications.
And I also think that the greater world out there understands that we're in a build mode.
Yes.
So there's work here, and that's a good reason to become certified. Last question, I'm sorry.
And I'm going to speak to that for a second. Yes, there's work here, but there's also work at DASNY. There's work at the
Yeah.
School Construction Authority. There's work at Empire State Development Corporation. So we are in a competition to go out and recruit and sell why you should be doing business here at the MTA. And we are, in fact, doing it by marketing materials and other type of things that we are currently doing. But make no bones about it, that the industry is flush. And so we need to sell why you should be doing business here at the MTA.
Last question. Do we have reciprocity agreements on our certifications in place?
Yes, we do. On the DBE side, once you're certified by the MTA, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, New York State DOT, or the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority in Buffalo, you're certified by all.
Right.
That's on the federal side.
So on the 1,700 firms that you reached out to, were some of them certified by other agencies? Is that why we did not have their
Yes.
identifying numbers?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
How many certified firms really do we have available to us? 1,700?
Danny?
We have about 2,800 statewide. Those certified by the MTA that are currently certified, about 800.
Danny?
And the state has about 8,000 certified firms.
I have a few questions. So we don't have reciprocity for MWBEs with other authorities?
No, so ESD, Empire State Development Corporation, runs the state's MWBE program. They are the only certifying agency for the 97 state agencies and authorities in the state of New York.
So you only have to get certified once?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
Yes, it is.
Second, we are also in a transformation mode. I'm glad to see our Chief Transformation Officer here today as a sign of a recognition of how important diversity is as we go forward. I wonder if you want to comment at all on these systems issues and how that's going to be a factor in transformation.
That's a really good question, Commissioner. Thank you. Michael and I have looked at what we can do to make sure all of our business processes make your objectives easier to achieve. And critical to that is getting in early so we can design in best practice into our systems. And what you referred to, this is typically one of the nuts and bolts issues we would look at to make life easier for all of us. And this is critical, particularly for the construction program. We need to make sure we have everyone in and available so we can deliver together what we want to deliver.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, and with your indulgence, I just have one more question. I think this may have been addressed previously, but obviously the gigantic contracts that the MTA awards can be an impediment for smaller firms, including MWBE. And could either you or Jana, whoever's appropriate, address what do we do to help facilitate participation by MWBEs in the larger contracts? Thanks.
There is Michael can speak to the statistics because he's led us in accomplishing some huge numbers. But what happens typically is that there's a 30% goal for M and W BEs on all of our contracts. So when you have one of those large jobs, the contractors who compete for it are obligated to find subcontractors, a mix of subcontractors, including MWBEs, that will allow them to achieve 30% plus a 6% service-disabled veterans participation. So that's the way that the big contracts yield significant MWBE and service-disabled veteran participation. So with Skanska or Dragados or one of the big firms is putting together a JV, they have to include those as part of their team. And we monitor. Michael is obviously in the leadership position, but the project team also is engaged directly in monitoring compliance with that participation goal. That's what's led to Michael's numbers. The second piece is what I think you're speaking to, is the identification of smaller contracts that are opportunities for smaller companies to either function as general contractors or as larger participants in a smaller job. And that's also an area where we have significant achievement in terms of the numbers of projects and the dollar amounts of contracts.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Just one follow-up question. On these sort of mega contracts, where we sometimes end up with only one or two bidders or one or two qualified bidders, do we
Yes.
still enforce the MWBE requirement?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and let me also state that Jano is absolutely correct on the mega side, but, setting goals on contracts, it's good. And achieving subcontracting and subconsulting goals, that's good. The new paradigm is to create, as Jano indicated, opportunities for MW and DBEs to work for us as primes. So the Small Business Mentoring Program does that. At Transit, historically, they've identified smaller projects between 3 and 20 million. And then went out and actively recruit minority women-owned firms to bid as prime contractors, because you do not build capacity on subcontracts. You build capacity on prime contracts, because now that MWDB firm is in control of their own destiny. They're not waiting 3 and 4 months to get paid. And so that's the new paradigm that's shifting to design smaller packages, actively going out and recruiting minority women-owned firms to bid to us as prime contractors so they can grow and they can develop. That's the new paradigm. Next is David Singh, who's going to give us. Yes, Norm.
Yeah, I think I followed what both of you said, and I'm not sure that my own primitive understanding of this fits entirely into the same frame here. But as we swing more toward both as a function of legislation and as a function of transformation and as a function of our own policies, more toward design build, it seems to me there will be less of the prime opportunities that you presented. So as this, as we incorporate design build into our being, will that make it harder or easier to? I mean, I heard what Jano said, and I know that they do work with the bigger firms to make this happen, but my personal perception is the opportunities for the bigger firms are going to get bigger, and the opportunities for the smaller firms are going to get smaller as a function of design build. Right. I don't know whether that's good or bad for your goals, yes. and I don't know which way where you guys think it is.
Yes, so we are thinking ahead, and as Jano has indicated, that on mega projects like design builds, we are going to enforce the MWDB goals. With respect to a design builds, there's going to be opportunities on the design side and opportunities on the construction side. And so, thinking ahead, we are going to look at what's available between the sweet spots for most of our MWDB firms. That's between 3 million and 20 million. And so the new law says that anything in excess of 25 million must go design build. There's a lot of room and opportunity for MWDB firms from the 3 million to the $24 million range that we have.
Is there a data set or a metric that you will have that will be able to demonstrate before and after this watershed move to design build, the number of prime opportunities that are available to the MWBE firms? Is there a metric? Will you be able to chart that going forward and say, look, we ended up with more, because I did think your position, as a mechanic, I did think your position on the control of the firm and the prime contract was an important position. And how many of those are available going forward is my concern.
Yes, so we run our data monthly, tracking how many contracts were awarded, prime contracts were awarded to M&WDB firms, in addition to how many of them received subcontract opportunities with dollars paid. So we are tracking this on a monthly basis. We are required to report to our funding partners on a quarterly basis for the state of New York and on a semi-annual basis to the FTA. So we are monitoring this, we are tracking it, and we are reporting it. And that's a great point, a great question. So I will report back to you and this committee as we go on how many prime contracts were awarded to our pool of MW and DB firms. That's a great point. Thank you.
I just would encourage, I think on MW DBEs, the authority and under your leadership and the team has done an extraordinary job. To the point that was just made, I would encourage other creative measures along the way to reinforce it. 20 years ago or whatever it was, I'm a lawyer, right, in the legal services field. Corporate America started telling law firms, if you want our contracts, you have to be diverse. And we expect certain levels of diversity in the teams that interact with us. Now, I realize we're government, so we have different, rules around us. But whatever we can do to encourage diversity in the leadership of the companies that are benefiting from the contracts that we put out, we have to work on our own diversity, too. That's a separate topic I'm sure we'll come to later. But I would just encourage other creative measures to help ensure that we're widening inclusion across the board.
Yes, and led by Governor Cuomo, there's been new initiatives enacted. So, for example, there is a diversity matrix in our RFPs, which forces the respondees to tell us how many partners they have, how many diverse partners they have, and other kind of workforce metrics as such. And then the contractors are required now to submit to us on a monthly basis their EEO forms. And so we see how many diverse workers they have, and the underlying that is the pay equity. So making sure that there is pay equity for the workers who are working on our contracts.
So if I could just sort of follow up on Norm's, I think, very interesting point, which is what is the impact of design build on our diversity objectives and achievements? And it seems to me we have something of a scientific experiment already because we have a before and after and could report on that and then could come up with our learning from that, which is what type of is it an improvement? Is it a detractor? And what type of mid-course adjustments would be appropriate in order to deal with the change that we've changed structurally, how we're doing with our construction projects. So I think it's a fascinating point. I think we should drill down on exactly that issue with what we know from information on hand and what we suggest going forward.
Yes, so we are tracking a number of our mega projects as we speak. So, for example, we have Phase 3 of Croton Harmon with Skanska and Echo 3. They are meeting their MWB requirements. I think it's a $365 million contract. We're also tracking Third Track on a monthly basis, and so as time goes on, we can tell the effect that the design build is having. But I'm optimistic that, as Jano indicated, that we're going to enforce our goals on any contract that we award. And Jano is right, because his project management team, they are responsible for enforcing all of the terms and conditions of that contract. Once MWDB goals are signed and that contract is signed, the MWDB goals become part of the terms and conditions of that contract. So his respective project management team, in conjunction with my staff, they have the responsibility of enforcing all of the terms and conditions of every contract that we award. David Singh.
Good morning. With regards to EEO, the current workforce stands at 73,939. In spite of the limited opportunities for hiring that existed in 2019, MTA still was able to hire women and minorities at a rate above their current representation in the workforce. Details regarding the new hires are listed on page 57. Additionally, the utilization of women and minorities has remained constant when we compare that to 2018, compare 2019 to 2018. And of course, again, this is in spite of the limited opportunities that were presented in 2019. So our trend has been constant thus far, and our strategy continues to be increased staffing and expanding relationships with professional women and minority groups in order to increase applicant pool and so forth. This concludes my presentation.
So I addressed this on Monday, and I understand the challenge from last year. I think our strategies have to be transformational in this regard. These numbers are just not acceptable. And I think that we have to think outside of our box as well, and what policy initiatives should we be pushing at the state level or otherwise with respect to, for example, child care or whatever the other obstacles are to participation by women. I know this team can do it. You have to tell us what you need to get there. You have proven above any expectations on the MWDBE front that you achieve at a high level. You need to tell us what you need to get there on the employee participation as well.
Two questions, sir. Could you go back one slide? Okay, first of all, I'm confused by the third bullet. I see 455 EEO complaints for agencies, and then in the fourth quarter it says there was 591 EEO complaints. So the 455 is what period? It's clearly not annual.
The 455 is for the current period, as of December 2019.
For that quarter or for the year?
No, for the year.
So in the fourth quarter of 18, we had 591, and in the whole year of 19, we only had 455.
That's correct.
So we had a massive decrease, but somehow the fourth quarter of 18 was a particularly bad month or quarter for EEO complaints.
It wasn't the quarter per se, it's cumulative, so it's for the entire year.
So it is the year.
Yes.
So, okay, this is not clearly written. So the 455 is comparable to the 591 because they're both the years?
That is correct.
Okay, so we had a drop, which is good. So second question then is, how does this rank against other organizations of comparable size? This is 0.6%. So 455 divided by 73,000 is 0.6%. How is that compared to other organizations? And you may not know the answer now, but I think seeing a stat like this, I don't know if 455 is good or bad. I'm glad it went down materially by 140. That's a pretty big change. So I'm scared to know what happened in 18, but I would like to understand if 455 is actually quite low relative to organizations of our size, comparable, or poor. Do we have a sense?
Certainly, we can look at that and get back to you on that.
Okay, my third question is, we have 2,000 veterans, and I'm both a veteran and a disabled veteran at that. Although I'm only 10% disabled, I am a disabled veteran. The population in the United States of adults is 18 million veterans in the United States. The adult population in the United States is 200 million. That's approximately 10%. So the population in the United States is 10% veterans, which is actually a shockingly high number. It probably skews older, given different waves of military service, so maybe they're not of employable age, but I'm surprised how low our percentage is relative to that population. And then interestingly enough, for those who were here on Monday at the joint Metro-North Railroad and Long Island Railroad Council meeting, two of our senior executives retired. One was a Marine Corps veteran, one was an Army veteran, Dennis and Rod. And I'm just surprised that given, I think, because contrary to what Rhonda said, I've been on the diversity committee, I think, for 4 years now, and we did not have veterans listed when I joined the committee. I actually was the one who asked for veterans to be added. So I do see on occasion, Michael, that we do have veterans job fairs, and you attend those things, which is good, but we have, as far as I can tell, 2x more to go to cover from 3% up to 10%, because I think a reflection of the population would be a reasonable goal to have. So that's enough of my soliloquy.
So that's a great point, and we are going to be giving them more in-depth presentation at the full entire board meeting on this morning. And there are a number of best practices that we met with all of the operating agencies and came up with the 10 top best practices. And so Dr. Green is going to talk about that. And you're right. I mean, we need to, as Susan has been saying, and as you have been saying for a long period of time, that we need to put infrastructure and resources in place that ensures that the employees who we recruit, we hire, and retain is going to be diverse. We've done it on the business side. We can do it on the people side, but it's going to take focus, and it's going to take for everyone to work in tandem. Let me give you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Is it's interesting when you go through several of the TSA facilities, and particularly at Reagan in Washington, they have signage reminding you how high the percentage of TSA agents, relatively new agency, I understand that. 25% of the TSA are veterans. Now, I would tell you that I've been on a number of boards and I've worked at a lot of organizations in my professional career. At least I'd say Metro North, which I know better than the rest of the divisions, is pretty quasi-military. We have the structure we have feels very akin to, in fact, one of my West Point classmates is a conductor on my train on the 653 from Garrison. And so I'll tell you that it's not a hard sell to get a soldier or a sailor or an airman to join the MTA.
Right.
I didn't come up with the name. Call the Air Force, not me. That's what they call them.
Right. You know, and agreed. And I often say that I cannot have an intelligent conversation with anyone in 2020 about how we can't find women, how we cannot find blacks and Hispanics and Asians. I can't have an intelligent conversation about that, and I won't have one. We need to come up with strategies that's going to allow us to recruit and hire and retain in a diverse manner. Let me give you a quick 15-second story. I was in one of the worst NYCHA housing projects in the South Bronx, and I'm visiting family, and I look up and I see the head basketball coach at Syracuse University, Jim Boeheim. He was in one of the worst crime-ridden housing projects in this city because he was recruiting a 6'5" sophomore by the name of Carlton Hines. So if we are incentivized to go and to look at places that we don't normally go to look to get to hire staff, we got to do that, period. George is going to give us an update on the Small Business Mentoring Program. We came out with a decade of results, 427 contracts awarded in 10 years for $446 million. This program is transformational. It's giving and affording certified minority women-owned contractors the ability to come here to work as prime contractors. And the program was so successful that it expired at the end of last year. The governor extended this program for the next 10 years. George.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Good morning, Madam Chair Herman and board members. My full report starts on page 80. 2019 was a record year for us. We exceeded our goal by $6 million on 58 contracts that were awarded. And since the inception of our program, we have awarded 427 contracts, totaling $446 million. This past year, we pre-qualified 11 service-disabled veteran-owned business. 3 of those firms were awarded contracts totaling $1 million. Our loan and bond program. Since the inception of the loan program, we have had 120 loans that have been approved, totaling $16.8 million. Our surety bond assistance program, we assisted 24 firms, which yielded $412 million in surety bond to our contractors. As Mike indicated, with a decade of success, state legislator recently approved to extend the program for another 10 years to December of 2029. Our program is far exceeding its goals, and we continue to trend upward. That concludes my executive summary. Thank you.
And thank you, George. And Susan, we've come a long way in 10 years. A long way in 10 years.
Not the least of which was to get to be allowed to do it in the first place. That took us 3 years.
It did. It did. So we changed the state law. Right. Ray Burke is going to give us a quick presentation on MWDBE contract compliance.
Good morning. My presentation begins on page 98. I'll be presenting the MWBE and DBE and SDVOB contract compliance. Overall, for state-funded contracts, for the first 3 quarters of the current fiscal year, the MTA goal is 30%. We are currently achieving 26%. The overall MTA SDVOB goal is 6%. We're currently achieving 4%. As far as federally funded contracts for the full fiscal year of 2019, the overall MTA DBE goal is 18%, and we are achieving 26%. We are exceeding the goal in that area. In other areas of compliance, we are currently monitoring approximately 1,050 contracts. As far as site visits are concerned, in 2019, we averaged 56 monthly site visits, which exceeds our 50 per month goal. We perform site visits to ensure that subcontractors are actually working on the projects and providing a commercially useful function and to eliminate fraud. As far as closed contracts are concerned, in 2019, we averaged 9 monthly closed contracts per month. As far as trends, the overall status, MWBE and SDVOB goals are not being met. The trends, SDVOB is upward, MBE is constant, and WBE is downward. Listed are the strategies that we have for improving in all areas of compliance. Capital projects for the federal fiscal year 2019, the DBE goal is 18%. We're achieving 20%, once again exceeding the goal. State-funded contracts, the first 3 quarters of the current fiscal year, the MBE goal is 15%. We're achieving 10%. The WBE goal is 15%. We're also achieving 10% in that area. The MTA SDVOB goal is 6%, and we're achieving 0.24%. Status, once again, we're not meeting the goal in MWBE and SDVOB. Trends, MWBE and WBE is constant, and SDVOB is downward. That concludes my presentation.
So next, I will give a brief overview on legal fees. In 2017, former Vice Chair Freddie Ferreri asked me to look at this. We pulled the data, and in 2017, we were averaging 4% in fees to minority women-owned law firms. And so when I briefed the Vice Chair, he simply looked at me. He said, "Well, fix it." And so we started talking to each one of the operating agencies' councils. We had outreach events. We went out via an RFP. We advertised in the Law Journal. We advertised in the ethnic minority papers, and we had an orientation. And so going from 4% in 2017, we increased fees to 8% in 2018. And in 2019, we are currently at 19%. And so I want to thank the operating agencies. We've made progress. We're not there yet, and I'm not going to rest, and we're not going to rest until we achieve Governor Cuomo's 30% MWBE goals with respect to legal fees being assigned to state-certified MWBE law firms. Financial services, Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. We are reporting that there is no change from our last report in December 2019, as we continue to maintain the highest level of payments in New York State, with 58% of payments being made to New York State certified MWBE and SDVOB underwriters. Again,
What's
that's
that number again?
58%.
So 58%
of payments.
Of all payments to our underwriters, investment banking firms, are going to New York State certified MW and SDVOBs.
That's correct. That was
How
for
much
this
again?
year.
50 what?
58%.
58%. Highest in the state?
Highest in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Great work, Patrick.
Asset fund managers.
Thank you. I'm the relatively new CIO, and my comments begin on page 129 of the materials. The total defined benefit plan has assets of about $8.5 billion. 17% of that, or nearly $1.5 billion, is being managed by MWBE managers. Of note, over 50% of our equity allocation and nearly 40% of our real estate allocation is with those types of managers. To put that into context, when you have a long-term investment horizon, you don't have that much in terms of manager change. So those numbers are really a very, very strong metric of success. The trend is positive. Diversity of thought has become and continues to become more of a mandatory requirement of a good investment process. So we expect going forward that the universe of MWBE managers will continue to expand. In terms of the initiatives going forward, our consultant is very dedicated to this initiative. They have an in-house committee. They have committed a fair number of resources. Every manager that we come across or that finds us finds their way to NEPC and goes through their screening process. So I'd say generally it's a very, very strong story.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And this concludes our presentation, but I just want to also recognize my entire staff. I have staff sitting in the audience. Can you stand up? And staff sitting here. And I would say that thanks to Governor Cuomo and the MTA board and the various chairmen, we have created the most effective, innovative MWDB program in the nation. And I'll put this team up against anybody in the country focused on results. And I just want to thank them for their hard work and dedication of coming in here and getting it done under adverse circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, I'd like to thank you and your team. The work that you've done on the MWBE program is fantastic. And like Commissioner Lacewell said, and you and I have had discussions, we have to do the same, and I know we can do the same when it comes to the metrics on employee diversity in the MTA. So we look forward to seeing and being whatever you need from us. As Linda says, we're here to help you. So with that, we're going to need a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? The meeting is adjourned.